Dino Paredes is the A&R VP for American Records, which is a label that Rick Rubin started some time ago, and Dino and Rick are partners in that label, I believe. And Dino just came in today from LA, and we're gonna change the format a little bit. He's gonna introduce himself, and then we're just gonna start with questions from the assembled masses. So Dino, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Dino. Hi, everyone. I work with Rick Rubin of American Recordings. We're a label based in Los Angeles. I am the head of A&R and the general manager of the label. Been there for 12 years this coming June. Rather than get too involved in a lot of background, what I'd like to do is ask everyone to sort of, if they want to move in and make it a little easier, let's make this about what you guys want to hear about and what you guys want to talk about. And I'm happy to address any topic that you guys would like to know about. If it involves any background on my end, I'm happy to get into it, but I'd rather have it be about what you guys are interested in as opposed to what I do and who I was or who I am. If you guys want to know that kind of stuff, I'm happy to tell you, but let's make it more about you guys. So maybe the way to do this is throw it open to questions or topics or anything that you guys want to hear about or ask or talk about. Let's do that. Like I said, if there's any interest, if there's any background interest you want to know about myself or the label or Rick or anything like that, feel free to ask anything you want.
I have a question.
We'll start with the young man on my right.
On what basis do you sign an artist?
That will go into a little bit of an elaborate thing that we kind of talked about a little bit. We're a bit of a different label in that when I came to work for Rick back in 1994, the company was a large company. It was 60 plus people, and it had gotten kind of fat and kind of lethargic. I came in to sort of reinvent the company and redirect it and partnered up with Rick on this. The main thing we wanted to get back to was signing artists based on one criteria and one criteria alone, and that's that we had to love the artist. It was the first and foremost thing that we had to look at, as opposed to looking at how many records you think they might sell right away or what the masses think of them right away or whatnot. We had a luxury built into the company in that we have a catalog that is entirely owned by the company since the company existed, that sells itself all by itself. It's a very large catalog, so it makes money for us. It's pretty much maintenance free. So we don't have a lot of the overhead and fat that a lot of other labels have. So it allowed us to go back to signing artists based on what we loved and sort of reinvent the company. So that's truly our one criteria, that if the staff brings us anything, or if I bring anything in, or if Rick finds something, we inevitably will sit back at Rick's house one day and listen to it and just ask ourselves, we really love this enough that we want to sign it. And a lot of times we don't. We don't sign a lot of artists. We have a very small roster. It's not intentional, like I said it was, but it's a byproduct that we don't love as much stuff out there as we'd like to. I mean, I'd love to sign 1,000 artists, because that would mean there's a bunch of artists that I love, but there aren't. So we kind of go for what we love only.
Who was the last artist you signed?
The last artist I signed, I think I just did a deal in the car over tonight. We're closing a deal right now, which I think we just finished tonight, with a band called The Faint from Omaha, Nebraska. Yeah, that we've loved and have been chasing for 4 years.
How did they come to your attention?
They were just out there and doing it themselves. They went on an indie label in Omaha. Great bands will get people's attention. They always do. And The Faint are a great band. So they were touring on their own, drawing a lot of people, getting airplay in college stations, getting press in some magazines here and there. And just there was a word of mouth that was happening very quickly about this band. And when we first heard it, we fell in love. And it's literally been 4 years of us chasing this band, like trying to sign them over and over and over, and them saying, no, we don't want to, we're not ready. And then finally last September, they came and said, we think we're ready to go now.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah,
It's kind of unusual, right?
It's really unusual. Most bands don't get signed that way, or it doesn't happen that way. This band is different in a lot of ways. You know, this is a band that's managed to be self-sufficient for a long time. They sell a lot of records. They tour really well. Every member in the band lives off of being a member of this band. Very well, actually. Yeah.
Well, do bands generally find you, or you find them?
Both. Depends. Yeah.
Anybody have any questions for Dino?
I have a question about the thing. Was it difficult to sign them because of stuff with Saddle Creek, or just because it didn't like the deal they were getting?
No, it had nothing to do with Saddle Creek, actually. They were very happy on Saddle Creek, as you can imagine. They were selling over 100,000 records consistently. They had complete creative control and freedom on Saddle Creek. It was difficult only in that the band didn't know if they wanted to actually make that leap from being a band on a very communal label. You know, if you know Saddle Creek, they're all partners in this label. There are 12 primary partners made up from the original band members of several bands that started Saddle Creek. For them, it was a matter of, did they really need to sign at that point when we first started talking to them? And they felt like they might, but they were unwilling and afraid to make that leap because they were afraid of what would happen. And then what eventually did happen is they put the last record out, which is a phenomenal record, but again, it did the same thing that every record's done so far. It sells 115,000 records. And this is a band that tours and draws thousands of people. And particularly overseas, they weren't happy with what they were getting in return overseas. And they realized that they had kind of outgrown what Saddle Creek's abilities were, and that there were some limitations that were affecting them at that point. And luckily for us, we maintained a relationship for 4 years with them. Like, I'd still go see shows just as a fan. I love that band. So the difficulty now, most bands don't take 6 months to sign a deal. When you start talking about negotiating a deal, it's maybe 6 weeks. But the deal we're doing with them is very complicated. It involves a lot of creative control for them. We're doing things in this deal that we've never done. They're getting points in the deal that they would never have gotten, that we and or our parent company, Warner Brothers, have never given to any artist. But for Rick and I, we love the band that much that it's completely worth doing. And I'm thrilled to do it, you know. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure you've heard before that many people say that A&R reps are clowns or goons, and they have no place in today's market.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of response to that?
For the most part, it's true. I think there's both. Honestly, the whole business is that way, though. I'll be really honest about it. The business has a bit of an image problem, but that's only because there are people out there who give it a bad image. It's a dirty business at times. It really is. And you guys will see that at some point probably, or you've seen it already perhaps. Conversely, there's a lot of really cool people out there. But you tend to not see them as much as you see the other ones because they stand out and get a lot more attention. With regard to the A&R world, it's a really competitive field. So what you get is you get a lot of guys who are out there being really, really uncool, for lack of a better word. There's a lot of backstabbing going on. There's a lot of guys, and girls for that matter, people in general, slinging a lot of dirt. You know, there's a lot of rumors flying around constantly about what so-and-so did at whatever club, or did you hear about so-and-so on the road doing this? You know, all I can say is if you take the time, there is an amazingly low-key undercurrent of people in the business that you probably will never see on the outside. And they're the good ones. They lay low, they go to shows, they do their job, they take care of their artists, take care of the people in the office, and try and do the right thing.
If you had like a single criticism to levy against the people who were called, would it be like lack of professionalism?
Ego.
Was it
Ego. Yeah, a lot of guys and a lot of people in general in this business make it about them and not about the music or the artists. And it's really prevalent. There are A&R people out there who want to be treated better than their artists, or who want to have as much attention as their artists are getting. It's probably stemming from some weird childhood thing. I'm not kidding you, seriously. There's a lot of pressure on that side of the business, and there's probably a lot of insecurity that goes with it. And if you had some of that growing up, and I'm guilty of it sometimes too, you get this moment in the sun, and you're basking in it, and you're like, oh my God, I can tell that person to do this for me. And it's a bit of a power trip sometimes. You've got to just be aware of it and try and catch yourself. I've been guilty of it. I definitely have. Early on, there was just times where you can't believe how lucky you are if you have any success in this business. I have the greatest job in the entire world, I think. And I'm so fortunate to have had some success with it. But at the same time, I wake up every day being really thankful for it. But there are times where you look around and go, oh my God, this is my world, this is my life. And it can be really, really amazing. And I think when that happens, there's a really strong possibility that it just goes to your head and you become a real prick immediately. And there's a lot of those people out there. It's 50-50. I really think that. I think there's half the business that's great. And there's half that are probably pretty good at their jobs. They're just real pricks. What else?
A&R guys typically don't last. I've heard more than a couple of years. How would you think it last? 12 years?
Yeah, 12 years. I'm in a really unique position. American Recordings is basically Rick Rubin's label and has been from day one. And if anyone here knows Rick or knows about him, he's a really unique individual. And because we've had a higher percentage of success per records than most labels, there's like a 1 in 10 ratio that tends to be the norm for most labels. We've had a higher ratio than that, and we've managed to make a profit and have great records and have a great roster and be really happy doing it. So for me, probably it's because I work for Rick, and we have a very humane relationship. We're friends first and foremost. We talk about business probably in a different way than most label reps or label heads and presidents talk. We have a similar vision. And we don't let the business drag us down, to be honest. I mean, we try to make it fun. And it's probably going to be an anomaly because I think a lot of companies don't have that luxury. There's a different bottom line that other companies have to go and are forced to look at constantly. Larger corporations, which we're part of, have a bottom line to look at. Our bottom line is very simplified. It's like a mom and pop business almost. We're basically an indie label that's actually me, so I should turn this thing off, I just realized. We're an indie label basically that has the abilities and the resources and the roster of a major label that has sales that also come out on a major label level. It's kind of a weird anomaly, but maybe the best answer to that is that we get along, And I think the other side of that is that I've managed to sign some bands that have done really well, and I've managed to take care of Rick's artists on day-to-day basis, which he doesn't really do, and keep those going as well. And we're kind of a happy family. It's kind of wild. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. Most of them tend to last about 3 years. Yeah, the average length of a contract for an A&R person these days is about between 2 and 5 years. tends to run out around 3 usually. Yeah.
I just wanted to know, like, how did you get started? Like, where did you start off and how did you get into music?
Okay. Which I imagine is important because you guys all want to be in this in some level of business. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to turn this off because it's going to make little buzzing noises. So give me 1 second while I turn this off. I'm really sorry, guys. It's kind of a weird story and kind of a little fairy tale for me. When I finished high school, I was 16 years old, and my plan was to start college immediately after my first summer off. And I went to college as a double major in philosophy and fine art. And I had this wide-eyed mentality. I'm 40 years old, and I grew up in an era where it was the end of classic rock, and punk rock happened on the heels of it. And there was this big sort of contrast going on. I had an older brother who took me to great classic rock concerts. And as I got older, and where I grew up, the town I grew up in had a really great punk rock movement. So I had all these things around me, and they excited the hell out of me. Like, it was so cool that I could see guys playing at little local garages. I grew up thinking that guys in bands and rock stars were like these 18-foot people that lived in these different universes that you could never get close to. So I never really thought about being in the business. So when punk rock came around, I realized it was that one of the bigger edicts of punk rock is that it's for everybody. And you shouldn't be afraid of it, and that music is made by people, just like you and I. So I went to school, and I was still studying philosophy and fine art, and started dating the craziest punk rock girl in the whole school. There were 4 punk rocks in my school. It was me and my friend Sean and these 2 girls. So of course we started dating the 2 girls, and there's the 4 people with crazy hair and crazy outfits walking around school. But this particular girl she was older than me by about 4 years, and she had been in the scene a lot longer and had met some people at a label in downtown Los Angeles that was known for putting out these really artsy, sort of industrial, experimental punk rock records, and they were all done super artistically because the guy who did the label is also an art major who would design all the packages. They'd be hand printed and they'd be really beautiful. So when I first saw these, I was so enthralled by it, being an art major also, that it was like this weird link between art and music that I just thought never existed. So I started interning there. I went down there one night with her and met this guy, and he's just a guy like me and you. He was going to UCLA, and he was about 24 years old and had his little label, and he needed help. So I started stuffing envelopes. I would put 7-inch records in the sleeves, and we'd number each one, package them up and put the little vinyl wrap on them, and just doing anything I possibly could. And as I started doing that, I started realizing that I was actually somehow now involved in the music business. I was a dumb little 17-year-old kid who didn't know what he was doing, but it just happened that way. And this is going to be a bad thing to say, but I ended up dropping out of college in my senior year to go work for this guy because this little label, the other side of what they did was this printing press, this old-fashioned hand letterpress printing press. And we were putting our records out with these great, cool letterpress covers. They were all hand-done. And people in the business kept noticing them, and we had gotten a Grammy nomination. Just a couple of knuckleheads in this little shop in downtown Los Angeles got a Grammy nomination for a record that we put out that sold maybe 2,000 pieces. But the packaging got people's attention, so we were getting hired out to do printing for other places and design for places. So I found myself talking to people from Virgin Records, from Capitol Records, from Warner Brothers. We were printing records for them. We were doing special editions for them, designing them and printing them. And the next step was that I got offered a job at a label that was part of the Elektra family as the art director. And back then, I think I was making, it was $200 a week. And I was living, like a bum, and I was in my bands, and I didn't care. As long as I could eat once in a while and have the freedom to be in my band and do all this stuff, I did it. And then this job came around, I thought, wow, I could be, a little more comfortable and whatnot. So I took this job as an art director. And the label that I went to go work for, their A&R staff was fairly older, And what they were trying to do was become a younger, hipper label. They wanted to find cooler bands. And they would walk by my little office and they'd hear me playing music and they would go, what the hell is that? You know, it sounds ridiculous. And I would tell them, well, this is so-and-so. And they'd never heard of it. And they would say, well, there's, you know, college kids across the country listening to this stuff. And this is what's happening now. And I'd show them CMJ and they would, wow, people actually know this band. You know, it was just a different world for them. So it was sort of like I got asked to give these people demos or tapes or records of other bands that I knew that I thought were great. And like a lot of people in the business, I was pimped out without really knowing it. You know, I'd been used by my superiors to be an A&R source for them without really knowing it. It's fine, I didn't care. I was making a paycheck. I was happy as could be. That label moved to New York, and I didn't want to go to New York. I decided I didn't want to stay in LA. I was born and raised there. I had family there. And I just didn't want to leave. So I let them go, and I became a freelance art director. And I was working for Hits Magazine, doing some stuff for them. And then I started working for another little punk rock label called Triple X. And again, made more connections and started playing in bands that people started knowing. So I found myself meeting even more people. And after 6 months of that, I got offered a job as an art director at the biggest independent label in the world, which at that point was a hip-hop label called Priority. And they offered me a lot of money, which I thought it was at that point a lot of money. And I was like, wow, I can't say no to this. I can design hip-hop packages, you know, and still be in a band and do my stuff. And so I did that, and I got to work with Ice Cube and NWA and Dr. Dre and all these amazing artists. And I loved early hip-hop, so I was happy doing it. And then that label decided that they wanted to branch out, and that was about the time when bands like Nirvana were being really successful, and Smashing Pumpkins, and they were selling a lot of records. And these two guys that ran this hip-hop label that I worked for kept seeing these rock records, you know, selling a lot of records, and they just couldn't figure out what the hell the deal was. They were so focused on hip-hop, and that's all they knew. And I was one of the few guys in the company who listened to rock music. And they said they wanted to start a rock division, and would I get involved in, you know, somehow helping out? And I said, of course, I don't care, I'll do whatever I can to help. And so I started being sort of groomed to start phasing out of being an art director and being this guy who just was involved in this rock division of a large hip-hop independent label. And I stopped doing art altogether and just started focusing on trying to find bands. Without even knowing it, I didn't really know what had happened. And one day they handed me a new set of business cards, and it had my name on it, and it said Director, Rock Division, Priority Records. And I was like, wow, what's that? I didn't know. I really didn't know. And it kind of happened that way my whole life. I just kind of fell ass backwards into things constantly. And that was an example of it. And so now this is like the early 90s. And I went out and we managed to sign a band that people were trying to sign everywhere. And we got this band. Like, wow, how did we get this band against a bunch of labels that do rock already? And I realized that it had been a relationship that I created with the artist, and they chose to go there based on our relationship. And the owner of the label kind of dropped the ball and didn't understand that we needed to sign the deal right away, because unlike hip-hop, we were not a big fish in the rock pond. So in the hip-hop world, they were used to just taking their time, and they would sign a deal whenever they wanted to, and it would be fine. They're not going to go anywhere, don't worry about it. And I kept saying, no, this is different. This artist is a rock artist, and we are so lucky to have them say, yes, they want to sign to us. We have to sign it now. And it made the artist nervous, made me nervous, and the deal fell apart. And it was the beginning of the end for me. I realized how they were just not going to get how to do rock at this label. So I kind of became a lame duck there, and I asked to be let go for my contract. And they said no. By the way, that band was Everclear. So, yeah. So, but luckily for me, the relationship I had was great. So Everclear asked me to manage them, to co-manage them with their attorney. And I said, I don't know how to manage a band, but sure, I'll do whatever I can. So we took them to Capitol, and we got him signed to Capitol. And I became sort of this walking conflict of interest. I was working at my label and managing Everclear with their attorney, who then became my attorney. And it was this weird thing, but it was another thing that happened, ass backwards. I just didn't know. We lost the band, and yet I became their manager. It was this weird thing. And all the while, a friend of mine, who was now a really well-known producer, was in a band, and we just maintained our friendship over the years, and he had been signed by Rick to what was then Deaf American. And he kept telling me, you've got to meet Rick someday, you've got to meet Rick. He's just a nut. You're going to love him. You guys are like into the same music, the same art, the same books, the same crazy stuff. You guys have to hang out. Went on for a while, and one day, my phone rang at 2 in the morning, and there's a voice on the phone saying, is Dino there? And I said, this is he. And he goes, well, hi, this is Rick Rubin. And my friend's name was Dave. And I said, well, Dave, fuck you. You just woke me up. Thanks a lot. And I hung up on him. And well, rings again. He's like, Dino, this is really Rick Rubin. And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm really sorry. And he goes, do you want to have dinner tomorrow night? And I said, sure. And he's like, I'm like, how'd you get a hold of me? He's like, oh, Dave gave me your number, and Dave's in town, so let's go have dinner tomorrow night. Dave says we should meet. I said, okay. So I had dinner with Rick the next night, my friend Dave, and we just hung out and talked about music all night, and art, and books, and authors, and just stuff. And that went on for like 6 or 7 months. We just became friends. We'd go hang out at like UFO conventions, and go eat weird food, and just go hang out. We'd have a blast, though. We'd always talk about music, and we'd meet, and we'd share music. I would bring him stuff that I liked, demos, and he'd bring me stuff that he liked. Stuff they were releasing, like, what do you think of it? And I'd go, oh, it's terrible. And he goes, I know, I hate that we're putting it out. And we just kept hanging out, and I didn't realize what he was doing. He was sort of testing me for a while. And one day we're having lunch, and he says, so here's how we do this, and here's what we would do in this situation. What do you think? And I'm like, that sounds cool. He's like, well, this artist here, we really have to get rid of them, and we have to sort of, help these guys over here, and we should do that. And I said, I don't mean to be rude, Rick, but I don't work for you. If you're asking for a favor, I'm not really clear what it is. But it would be kind of weird for me to get in there and start working with your artists since I don't work for you. And you've got a pretty big staff, and I don't want to step on toes, but I'll do whatever you want me to do as a friend. I'm happy to help you. I love you. You're great. And typical Ricky goes, oh, yeah, I forgot. You don't work for me. What are you making right now? And I told him. And he said, okay, I'll offer you this much. Do you want to come work for me? And I said, yeah. But I said, I have a contract right now with my current employer. It's a hip-hop label, and they won't let me go. So I don't know what to do. I said, I guess I should call my attorney and have him call your attorney. And he's like, I don't care if you want to. I said, I can't make any promises. He goes, okay, well, start tomorrow, start next year, start whenever you want to. Just call me and let me know when you can start whenever that time comes. Wow, okay. I went back to my office. It was lunchtime. I went back to my office, and I went to the president of the company at Priority, and I said, I really need to ask you a favor. I need to get out of here. I'm miserable. This is not going well. You guys know it's not going well. And I just had an opportunity come up, and I told them honestly. I said, I've been hanging out with Rick Rubin, and Rick just offered me a job. And it's a dream. It's one of my favorite labels in the world. I would love to go work for Rick. And to my surprise, he goes, wow, that's really cool. And you're right. So when do you want to go? And I said, tomorrow. And he said, okay. And that was June of '94, and I've been working for Rick ever since. So that's kind of how it happened. I've managed to fail upward every time somehow. And things have always just sort of just happened by themselves. But I think that you guys can if you take anything from that, it's that if you get involved in what you want to be involved in, just be involved in it somehow, things will happen to you. Because every time I talk to people, they always ask, how do you get in the music business? And I say, just go get into it now. I met Rachel, and she found me just from being in a show. Go immerse yourself in the world of music, and whatever part you like of it, whether it be production, labels, intern, whatever, just go out there and be in it. And you'll be surprised at how much of what can come to you will come to you if you just get involved in it. It's hard to go to an employment agency and say, hey, I want to go be an A&R guy at a label. They're going to look at you and think you're insane, and they're not going to know what to do. You know, it's a different industry, and it's very much relationship oriented, and a lot of it is opportunity based. And you have to afford yourself that opportunity by being aggressive and being in it. Just go out there and do it. And if you love music, you'll have fun in the process. It depends. I wouldn't say most, but a lot. As we've gone over the years, Rick's gotten busier and busier, and the one sort of thing that we tend to do with every artist that we sign, no matter what, is that we work with them, meaning Rick and I, on some level of songwriting, and maybe even some sort of helping them to define their vision better so that we can help them to communicate later on. He ends up executive producing most every record, meaning that if he's not producing it, he'll oversee the producer and myself, and everything we do will go to him eventually for approval. Actual hands-on production, I'd say it's about half to two-thirds of the artists. It's a small roster, you know, so it's not that hard. But at the same time, Rick finds himself doing a lot of records right now that take a long time to finish and make.
I know Rick Rubin's producing a Metallica album.
Yeah.
At this stage in their career, which you would think would be a good idea to sign Metallica or not?
It depends. I mean, I think any band, you only sign them based on how good the music is. If you sat down with them and they had, 15 to 20 great songs, I'd say hell yeah. When you sign a band, a lot of it is definitely a risk versus reward thing. In the end, you have to ask yourself, do you love the songs and do you believe in the band? And if Metallica came to me right now and they said, hey, we're Metallica, and they didn't exist before then, you're saying, right? Like they were a brand new band, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying where they are now, what they've done.
Yeah. I mean, you can almost guarantee yourself that they're going to make a good record with a producer like Rick. He's going to push them a little further. It's going to be a lot less cheesy, and it'll be a better record. I think any band that Rick gets involved with will become a better band. Not just the record they make, but they'll be a better band overall, the long haul, just from working with him.
In the state of the record labels are in right now, would you say that the industry would be totally changing your opinion?
In the next how many years, I'm sorry?
Like, say, like 3 to 4 years.
I wish I knew exactly, because it's a scary time, I'll be honest. It's a very scary time right now. Like I was talking to John, we find words like content being thrown around and product more and more these days. I think what's happening is that we're in a trend where it's become about content because technology has become a big part of the music business, and I'm watching as laptops out, when I was a kid, you didn't listen to records except in your bedroom or maybe a cassette player in your car. Now, music's much more disposable and portable too. So what that's done is it's made the industry kind of the same way. It's a mirror image of it, which is why you get a lot of really bad artists putting out good songs, but then not having a real career on top of that. They may have a couple of songs that hold them over for a while, but it seems like longevity has kind of gone by the wayside. So what that's done, to get back to your question, is it's made the industry sort of panic and do two things. One is embrace the short term, which is sell music cheap on the internet. Sell it cheap at retail. Get it out there and just sell it to keep cash flow coming in. What you're not seeing is that behind closed doors, we're all sitting down there going, oh my God, how do we save ourselves from this tailspin? Because if we keep doing that, what's going to continue to happen, I think, this is my opinion, is that we're lowering the value of what is really boils down to art. And we're making it product. And we're taking the face off of it. And we're taking the tangible beauty of it and taking it away, and it becomes a download. It becomes a bunch of bytes on your computer. So what I think is going to happen is that that trend's going to continue for a little bit longer, and the backlash is going to get a little bit bigger and louder each year, and people are going to start trying at least to move it back to maybe being a bit more about art. And what we're hoping, at least what I'm hoping, is that people like yourselves and people who buy music will embrace it and maybe have a bit more commitment as a fan and not just a consumer. Because I think that what we're seeing right now is that it's consumer-based right now. And you see that younger people are buying records more and more. And they're just buying it because of a song they've heard on the radio, perhaps, they like, which is nothing wrong with that. But they don't invest themselves in music overall. Like, they don't love music the way that probably everyone here loves music, because this is your focus, perhaps. To them, it's strictly entertainment. It's not a bad thing per se, but the industry could easily begin to fail more and more unless fans become fans again. You know, it's an expensive endeavor to have a record company and be successful and continue to do it. And what's going to happen is that if we continue to devalue music, you're going to see labels putting fewer records out, and they'll probably become more shallow to appeal to that short term. So I think the trend's going to have its apex and then the consequences. You know, it could go either way. It could be that we embrace the art and people go back to buying records and really, you know, being fans and supporting it, and we can not sell records for as cheap as we sell them now, because oftentimes we lose money on records. A lot of times we lose money on records. Maybe we can go back to there being a happy balance again, to where people don't mind paying a fair amount for a record and being happy about it. I think that we've devalued the artist and their art and their music tremendously. I think we're all guilty of it. You know, consumers, labels for panicking, music fans for being lazy, and then on top of that, the artists for being mediocre. You know, there's a glut of mediocrity out there right now, and that's what's killing the industry too. So that's kind of a long-winded answer. I don't know if it makes any sense, but I think that we're heading for another crash at some point. Anyway.
Greg?
Sorry.
What do you think is like the most common mistake that you see among like bands that are, you know, trying to get out there, or even like not even just bands, but also people who are trying to involve themselves in the music industry?
Not what they believe in, doing what they think they're supposed to do. We'll take it in two steps: the bands and then people in the industry part. There's a lot of copycat bands out there right now. You see them all the time because they're looking at. I see a lot of bands that start being bands because they want to get signed, and they look at this little path that they're going to embark on, and it's how do we get signed, as opposed to how do we make like 15 great songs. You know, they don't rely on the talent and the ability that they have. All they want is a quick fix and a fast track to possible stardom. And I think a lot of them will sacrifice integrity and creativity to do it because they see someone else that has gotten there by doing Formula, 6, for lack of a better word. So consequently, they're going to turn around and go, okay, I watch what those guys have done, and I'm going to be influenced by it, and I'm going to start doing that, rather than say, well, here's what I kind of want to do, and having enough faith in it, that if you're good enough, then people will come find you. I think that's a common mistake. And it shows up with like a lack of sincerity and believability. That being the case, the really lousy part of that, as I'm saying that to you, I'm thinking of something else, and it goes back to what you said earlier, is that there are A&R guys who look for that. And they're going to go, okay, well, gee, Thursday sold a lot of records. I'm going to go find bands that fit the emo bill and are similar to that, and go sign them. Which is why you have a billion bands like Thursday now, and a billion bands that fit. You're laughing, but it's true, right? The new pop punk thing. I want to throw up. And seriously, I don't know if you like it. And everyone's entitled to their opinion and have their taste. I think that's great. I think no one's opinion is ever wrong. It's a matter of personal taste, and you're entitled to it. But smart people and intuitive people can tell what's real and what's not real. And when push comes to shove later on, like back to your question, a lot of these copycat bands and bands with no spine or no heart, they're not going to be around. They're not going to save music for us. Great bands will save music for us, hopefully. And that's like the faith you put in it, and you hope that great bands will save music and that people will support great bands. So that's a big mistake, I think.
I kind of want to ask, it's, where's the balance coming in though, too? Because, to a certain extent, it has to be, music has to be the foundation, it has to be the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but there's the other side of it where, if you don't do, all the things that you need to do as for a band to, get your stuff together, then...
I think it's up to the individual. I think you have to ask yourself, if you're a musician, is this going to be a job for you? Pardon me. Or is it going to be a labor of love? And I think that true musicians create from a place inside of them that doesn't think about commerce, how much their song's worth, or whatnot. They just do it because it's a passion and it drives them, and they have to let it out. It's expression at that point. It's art. It's a personal choice. I know a lot of bands that will calculate their formula. Here's the kind of band we're going to be. And we're going to do this, and then we're going to get signed, and we're going to do that. You have to ask them. If they're happy with it, then I'm happy for them. I have a hard time believing that some of those artists look themselves in the mirror and feel good about themselves in the long run. I'm not there to judge them. All I can say is that my opinion is that it sucks. And I hate it. And I think it devalues the whole thing. So the balance is, I think, up to everybody. I think that if we, as music lovers, can talk about things in a better way and be supportive of truly artistic, great music, I think that trend will change. From my point of view, there's a balance there that's probably off balance. I have a luxury of being at a place and having some success in the past, so that I don't have to think about that, to be honest with you. I look at the artist and go, wow, I can't stop thinking about it. I have to keep playing it. I'm in love with it. I have to somehow turn people onto it. And my job is to turn people onto it and spread the word and be a fan. So I think it's different, I think if you ask some labels, they would say the balance is, if you ask other label people, they might say the balance is, and I've heard this talked about, they look at a roster overall and they try to fill out every gap of what's currently successful in the music world. And they'll try to find bands that fit these little, like slots. And they're finding bands for that. I'm not here to judge them and say it's right or wrong. I'm just here to say that we don't do that. So I have an opinion about it, as you well know, I just expressed it. But that's what some people are doing. So that's the balance there. Is they look for some bands that are fitting trends. As far as the other side goes, as far as an individual and maybe getting involved in the business, the balance there, again, it's up to you. It's what you want this business to give you back in the long run. It's, do you want a paycheck, or do you want a paycheck, a career? Do you want happiness? It depends on why you're in it, I'm in it because I love music. And I didn't know anything else at a certain point in time. It was too late to turn back. If you would ask me what my dream profession would be, it wouldn't be this. But I do love it. But it's all I know now. And I'm the happiest guy in the world for it. You find a time and a place where everyone, I think everyone in their life sits back and goes, okay, how honest am I being with myself? And how do I feel about who I am as an individual based on your actions and what you do? I think that's the balance. I think it's when you feel like you've struck a balance to where you're happy with what you do. And if you do it in a way that you feel is honest and fair and good, then you'll feel better about it. I think that's it for me. Other people, I think it's different. Like some of the guys that he's talking about, they don't give a rat's ass about it. They really don't. It's how can they go out and find the hottest girls, have their ego maintained, and make a lot of money doing it. There's a balance there, you know. There's guys like me, maybe, and guys like that. There seems to be a place in this business for both of us. I'm not judging them for what they do, but I think that my opinion is that a lot of them go home at night unhappy. So I think everyone agrees that if you can make a living doing what you love, pretty cool. You'll be pretty happy doing it, you know, and that will probably create its own balance for you.
Insincerity is pretty easy to detect.
I'm sorry?
Insincerity is pretty easy.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. I think that that's a really good point. I think that in music, it's unfortunate that because of the panic in the industry, because of what's happened right now, is that I think we tend to overlook insincerity too much right now. Which is why if you watch MTV, it's not about music anymore. It's about who's going to pimp my car out, or who's sleeping with who on some reality show. I don't know how it relates to music. Music culture has changed so much. It's a whole different thing. Yeah.
If you pick one thing that you think American recordings could do better, what would it be?
Probably a lot of things. We're not the best at some of the business stuff. We tend to not pay as much attention to sometimes the bottom line as we should, in all honesty. And there are times when I have my fiscal meetings and I look and go, oh no, I'm going to get my ass kicked right now by the accounting people in our parent company. We're not the best at being realistic sometimes. We're a bit on the romantic side of things, and that we believe too much sometimes that it's all going to be okay if we just do great records. We shot ourselves in the foot that way. The company was in major debt for a while because of it. We're difficult to deal with, I think, for our parent company, for the same reasons. They want deadlines met and stuff like that. We're really bad at deadlines. We're really horrible at them. We're probably bad at those kinds of things, and a lot of it falls on me. My role as general manager, in addition to the head of A&R, is to oversee the business stuff. But I'm the first to admit that when I find a band that I love or we're making a record, I'll probably spend more time in that world than I should in my office looking over the business stuff. So we're kind of bad at that. And then the other side is that we can sometimes be maybe a little too methodical when looking at an artist. Sometimes we should just follow our gut and say yes right away. Sometimes we analyze it too much and get caught up in do we really love it that much? And trying to establish a relationship with the artist first, as opposed to just saying, let's sign it.
You sure? Because I think
Unless you know something I don't know.
a lot of people would say, no, I'm talking about you think we should follow more of gut instinct. A lot of people would blame the current problems in the industry on that reason, is that there's too much relying on the gut.
I think it depends on what your sort of definition of that is. An example being, there's an artist that we were looking at a couple of years ago, and myself and one of my guys on my A&R staff, we knew right away that they were great, but we didn't really just say, this is ridiculously great, and go do it. We talked to Rick about it and kind of nurtured it along instead of just saying, we really got to do it right now. And we let it go too long. And others found out about them. And that band, I think they're probably the most popular new rock band out there right now, and
Who are we talking
the Killers, yeah, and we just took too long to pull the trigger on it, and the band was saying yes, 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 sign us, and we were saying, well, we don't know yet. There's great songs there, but there's other question marks. We should have just followed our gut, I think. I don't know. It's a tough one. So I don't know the answer to your question. Maybe it is the reason that the industry's a mess sometimes right now, but maybe it's also a reason why maybe some of the other bands will get weeded out. I don't know. Yeah. That's what's my, yeah.
Earlier you said every band that Rick gets involved with is about a band after that. Could you pinpoint maybe some of the things that he does?
And again, this is just opinion, obviously, so you can take it for what it's worth. We try to remind all our bands and every band we work with that the most important thing you'll ever do is write a song. And most bands get lost in trying to rush to make a record. So when we make a record with a band, and whether it's for our label or not, I tend to get involved in every record that Rick makes. Rick's very abstract and very in the clouds a lot of times. So it's my job to balance him out and be the guy that shows up and does what he's supposed to be doing when Rick's out seeing his witch doctor or whatever, or getting his chakra read that day. It's true. You'd be surprised. But so what we try to do is we kind of go back to like basics, and we try to remind every band that if you're not going to write great songs, and a lot of them, you're devaluing yourself as an artist, and you're going to potentially take some years off your career. And inevitably, almost every artist, some get it right away, but almost every artist doesn't understand it right away. All they think about is, I've got 13 or 14 songs. That's enough for a record. You know what I mean? And we'll stop and go, okay, but do you have 13 or 14 great songs to make a great record? And every artist has this disease called the last song I wrote is the best song I wrote. And you have to, or you should, I think, at least, in our opinion, help them to create a sort of objective viewpoint of what they do themselves, and help them to listen to their music in a different way. And it's kind of a weird process, but we and Rick in particular, he just talks to them in a way that helps them to see what he's talking about, and it makes them examine themselves as an artist. And if you ever do that, honestly, you'll be a better artist overall. And you start realizing that you raise the standards for which you judge yourself to a higher level. And once that happens, they start doing it to everything, like their live show, everything they do gets better. It's just weird, it just happens that way. And they realize that if you take that risk and you push yourself a little further and you make a little more sacrifice and you work harder, that 9 times out of 10, the rewards will come back tenfold. And then it just perpetuates itself. And we've had bands that, will like have these epiphanies someday and just go, oh my God, I get it. Son of a bitch, what was I thinking about, And all of a sudden they're pushing us harder to push them harder, and it becomes this really cool sort of energy. But that's what it comes down to. It all starts there. The other part of it is Rick is amazingly warm and kind, and he makes artists feel safe to where they can become people again and talk to you about other stuff that they would not have talked about, perhaps, in the past. To producers, to label people. He just has this way of making you feel like it's okay. And you can tell him, gosh, Rick, I just did this horrible thing, really screwed up. And he's not going to judge you for it. It's going to end up being this discussion that you're going to benefit from this other way. He's taught me a lot of amazing things. He's a really amazing individual on a lot of levels, not just musically, but as an individual. And I think that bands and artists react to being treated as a human being differently, as opposed to just being a guy who's going to make a record for you. And it opens up other doors that makes them better people and consequently better artists. Make sense? Let's start over here. You first.
What would you say is the difference with working with like a newer artist like Bank, who's independent and has a strong fan following, maybe is well known all across the country, as opposed to like Johnny Cash or anything like the album last year?
Big difference.
Well known, but he was kind of he's kind of washed out.
Yeah. With those two particular artists, do you want to compare those two, like say
Yeah.
The Faint and Johnny Cash?
Yeah,
However you want to do it.
Okay.
You're the one in the chair.
Well, you can go hang out. It's definitely different. I mean, you know, with artists like the Fate, you realize, and you have to make them realize too, that the majority of what they're going to achieve, they haven't achieved yet. And some bands that have been around for a little bit tend to forget that because they've gotten to a really cool level already. And they should be rewarded and respected and honored for that. But there's a bigger picture that once a band like that decides to go to a major label and accept a lot of money in return for their services, that you want to go to a much higher level. And that's usually the hardest part. And that's the biggest difference, is that you have to realize that they tend to have this different perspective from the world that they come in. And you have to nurture them to that point. It's not like pointing fingers saying, oh, you're this small band still. It's just saying to them, you know, we have this amazing opportunity ahead of us, and there's a much bigger possible world out there for you. You know, let's see what we can do. And you sort of guide them a lot to see that. With an artist like Johnny Cash and more established artists, you realize they've been there already, you know, and you have to take a different approach to it, and that's like, how do you make this special again sometimes, or how do you make another record like for Metallica that's not the same Metallica record, you know? You have to sort of take it from a level of respect that they deserve and have earned, but at the same time, you challenge them in a different way to maybe not be lazy. You know, that's one of the established artists, you know, pitfalls, is you get comfortable and you get lazy. And every artist is different. But that's probably the major difference, is that you're trying to continue an existing career with a new special twist, hopefully, or make it better than it is already at what it is. Maybe not reinvent the artist, but just make them that much better. You know, with a newer artist, you're exposing them to a whole new world, and sometimes it's like a shock that comes with it, you know? And they realize, oh my God, I got this giant check, and I've got all these responsibilities to go with it now. And they freak out. You know, I was talking to Rachel in the car about an artist that we work in the studio with, and she knows them. And they got in the studio and they panicked. They were petrified. And the singer, who was an amazing singer, like, all the vocal takes were just really, like, watered down. And it was like a time to just go sit in the car with him for a while and go, you know, what's going on? And you realize that he had that epiphany, that big, open, you know, thing in front of him kind of hit him like a brick. And he's like, fuck, what do I do now, you know? Scared the hell out of him. So you have to sort of be there for that too, you know? Whereas an established artist knows that already. You don't have to worry about that. You know? There's less fear of an established artist, and a different kind of challenge.
Is there kind of almost like an ego challenge in this kind of?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. You've got to make sure that you keep that up there somehow, you know? A lot of that just comes from respect too. If you treat them accordingly and you treat them nicely, then usually that doesn't, you know, the ego won't be a problem.